My goal was to buy a fishing cabin and go fishing. That's why I bought this place. I wasn't planning on restoring a stream. I wasn't planning on being a fractivist. That was not it. I just wanted to fish. But I learned that all anglers and birders and hikers and anyone who enjoys the outdoors, if you really are passionate about it, you got to fight, you know? You have to fight for it. You can't just go fishing and go home. You just can't, because it'll go away.
Stephen Sautner is a lifelong fisherman, environmental activist, and the author of several books on those topics. And while his passion for fishing has taken him to the Falkland Islands, Cuba, the Zambezi River, and even New Jersey, a rustic fishing cabin in Hancock, New York is Stephen's happy place. Stay with us as we talk trout, Catskills living, and being a steward of the places we love. CatsCast is the winner of this year's Chronogrammy for Best Regional Podcast. We're honored by that recognition, and if you voted for us, thank you. We hope you'll tell your friends and family about us as we continue to roll out new Catskills stories every 2 weeks. This episode of CatsCast is sponsored by the Hanford Mills Museum. Explore the power of the past as you watch the water wheel bring a working sawmill to life. Bring a picnic to enjoy by the mill pond. For more information about scheduling a tour or about the museum's new exploration days, visit hanfordmills.org or call 607-278-5744. CatsCast is sponsored by the Central Catskills Chamber of Commerce, providing services to businesses, community organizations, and local governments in the Central Catskills region. Follow the Central Catskills Chamber of Commerce on Facebook. You can sign up as a business member and subscribe to a weekly email of local events at centralcatskills.org. Before we met, Stephen Sautner sent me 2 of his books, A Cast in the Woods, a story of fly fishing, fracking, and floods in the heart of trout country, and Fish On, Fish Off, the misadventures and odd encounters of the self-taught angler. Then he sent GPS coordinates for his well-hidden fishing cabin on 14 acres of hemlock forest in Hancock, New York.
So I've been fishing the Delaware and the Catskills for over 30 years. And in the early 2000s, my wife and I just decided we were sort of tired of camping on the river, or like I'd go up on a solo trip and sleep in the back of my car and that sort of thing. And so we sort of hatched this plan, hey, let's try to find a cabin. It took us several years to find the right place. We weren't in a rush. You know, it's one of those things when you know, and we saw this place in the middle of winter and hadn't been lived in, hadn't been occupied for a couple of years. It was kind of tired looking. And we sort of trudged through the snow and looked and saw the stream, and we both looked at each other and were like, oh my God, this is the place. We bought it in 2003. And it's been like the center of the universe ever since, at least in the springtime when the fishing's really good.
Stepping into the Sautner fishing cabin in 2022 is what you might imagine stepping into a Catskills fishing cabin in the 1940s would have been like. Set on the edge of a narrow creek, it's dark and rustic, with comfortable cabin furnishings and vintage decor, old fishing lures and reels, a small wood stove, stacks of field guides, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee.
It has this kind of 1940s guy with a fedora smoking a pipe and a red and black checked Woolrich shirt feel. You know, the kind of thing like you go fishing during the day and then at night you kick back with some rye. That's the feel we wanted for the cabin, and we try to emulate that in every way, including the rye.
And a few yards from the cabin, an equally rustic and well-appointed bunkhouse.
A lot of my friends who come up here and stay, you know, reserve, hey, I got the bunkhouse, right? Yeah, okay, you got the bunkhouse. Has this kind of like Little Rascals clubhouse feel. And there's a bunch of these old fishing-themed calendars that came from like a plumbing supply store from, 1957. And they have those like Kodachrome images of, again, the guy with the fedora holding the arched rod about to scoop it up in his net. And that's the vibe that we like here.
And while there is a small bathroom in the main cabin, Stephen has a preference for his hand-built outhouse just up the hill.
nestled in the woods. This sign indicating it. It's sort of a tin sign with this little metal outline of a gent running to an outhouse with an arrow. And there it is. It has a little wooden chair here in case there's, a wait. Sometimes when I have a group of guys up, there is a wait. Now, the thing that's cool about this outhouse, it's not a traditional outhouse in the sense that there's a pit and you go in the pit and it just sits. This is something called a moldering privy, which is an outhouse that uses cold composting to break down human waste. So it sits on a cribbing. You walk up steps, and the outhouse itself is about 3.5 feet off the ground. The cribbing is screened in, and it's basically a composting bin in here. And every year I stock it with red wiggler composting worms, and they do the dirty work. And so you use the outhouse, and then when you're done, you throw in a handful of forest duff, which is like partially composted leaves, on top of your own deposit. And between the natural composters that live in the duff that you don't see and the red wigglers, the stuff gets broken down quickly. And I just had 5 guys here using this, and there's really not much of a smell at all. And so we have a policy when we use the outhouse. We open the door and we look out over the woods and we listen for the ovenbird that always is nesting here. You can hear a red-eyed vireo way off in the distance. And we have a magazine rack in here with the Farmer's Almanac from 2020, I see. We have a book of fishing quotes. We have a pair of binoculars.
And even the moon cutout on the door, which you have to have.
You have to have a moon. It's not an outhouse without the moon cutout.
After touring Stephen's cabin, bunkhouse, and privy, we walked down to the real jewel of this angler's paradise, the trout stream itself.
I call it the 6-foot wide stream, and that's sort of the name I stick with because I just want to keep it private, even though the stream is all on private land, but that's just the way it is. So the 6-foot wide stream begins about 2 miles from where we're standing. There's a pond up there, and then it flows out of a wetland from that pond. It gathers up a couple of more little rills and really small tributaries, and then it becomes this, and then it flows down into the East Branch, maybe 2 miles from where we're standing.
Which is, on its own, a very famous
trout river. Yeah. The East Branch of the Delaware and the West Branch of the Delaware are renowned trout rivers, particularly the West Branch, because the tailwater fishery comes out of the dam. It's very cold, trout like cold water. The East Branch, too, to a lesser degree, is also very good fishing. And then it forms the main stem, which is also an amazing trout river. Climate change is a thing up here, everywhere, all around the world, obviously. And I'm noticing the season on the East Branch is shorter. Where I fish, which is the lower East Branch, used to run through the end of June. It was cold enough to fish for trout. And now we find that by the middle of June and even early June, it's too warm. It's done as a trout fishery for the season. And that's happening more and more frequently. Climate change is affecting us in all sorts of different ways. And if it's cutting into our fishing time, that's a bad thing. And it is. So
Stephen's engagement with the environment runs deep. His day job is with the Wildlife Conservation Society. And if you've never heard of it, well, you've heard of it.
It's based in New York. It runs the Bronx Zoo and the 4 other city zoos in New York City. So the Prospect Park Zoo, Central Park Zoo, the Queen Zoo, and the New York Aquarium, along with sort of the flagship Bronx Zoo. And it has field work in 60 countries around the world. So it's a 127-year-old organization that works to save tigers in the Russian Far East, which recently has been very challenging, as you might imagine. Gorillas in the Congo, whales off New York City, jaguars in Latin America, and everything in between. I think we have 4,000 staff stationed all around the world. Cutting edge conservation science, really cool stuff. So I communicate that stuff. I'm in their comms office, as we call it, and I help publicize this amazing work that we do. That's my day job, and it's given me an absolute appreciation. I mean, I've always been sort of an outdoors person, always loved fishing. That's kind of my driving passion. But through fishing, it gives me a lens to see all sorts of things that are connected to what does it take to have a functioning trout stream? And it's more than just water and trout. You need all the aquatic insects that live in the stream. You need good shade from all these trees, a lot of which I've planted. You need birds to keep pests in check. If one goes away, you start pulling on that string and it will all collapse. So my sort of personal conservation lens is wild trout. But I know to protect wild trout, it's a lot more than just protecting fish. It's protecting a whole ecosystem, and this is one of them. And it's so cool that this is literally, I own, as long as I'm on this planet, I guess. I mean, what do we really own in terms of land and streams? But I own this quarter-mile stretch of this trout stream, and I am a steward of it. And I've done my best to be a steward and play that role and protect it as best I can.
Aside from climate change, which is a big one, what are some of the challenges that the Catskills face?
Invasive species is a huge thing. I mean, these forests are going to transform, in our lifetimes. All the ash trees are going to die. And you don't realize how many ash trees are around until you see all the dead ones. It's one of the major tree species here. So that's all going. And emerald ash borer kills, I think, almost 100% of the trees. The woolly adelgid, which kills hemlocks, kills most of the trees. So most of the hemlocks are going to die in our lifetimes, too. It's a slower process. And then there's all the invasives like Japanese knotweed, which is all along every river. I even have a little stand here, tiny little stand that I very selectively spray. It's like 3 plants, but Japanese knotweed's the kind of plant like, only 3 plants, and then you have lunch and you come back and there's 50. It is a nasty, super aggressive plant. And all the other invasives that we see now. Now we have garlic mustard everywhere, deep in the woods where I never saw it before. Japanese stilt grass is coming. I mean, invasive species can drive you crazy. So that's absolutely an issue. Of course, we had the threat of fracking for a while. And, we bought our place, and next thing you know, a lot of people around here signed gas leases. And I did my research, and I said, this is not compatible with this landscape and all the wildlife here. And so I fought against fracking, and I was very sensitive to people who live here year-round because I know, this is a depressed area. People were looking to make money, but I just didn't think it was sustainable. I think they would have been, trashing their own landscape. And so I fought against it and became a fractivist, whatever you want to call it, got involved with the Catskill Mountain Keeper, fought it for years until finally, it was defeated in 2014. That was amazing. But the lesson you learn from fracking is there's always some scheme around the corner to exploit this area in a way that's not compatible with the long-term health of the ecosystem and, the wildlife and the whole food chain. So you always have to stay on guard and wait to see what the next one is and get ready to rally again and fight. But defeating fracking was a huge deal. And hopefully it'll never rear its ugly head here. And we'll see.
And the latest book that you wrote delves into that issue, doesn't it? Fracking.
Yeah. A Cast in the Woods is basically the story of this cabin, how I bought it, sort of fell in love with the place, fell in love with the stream, everything was cool. And then the flood hits, and I got to rebuild the stream, literally, and did the fish come back, and everything's looking good. And then all of a sudden, when it seems like, we started to restore, the whole issue of fracking comes up, and I get into the whole battle of fracking and how it was defeated. And so, I mean, again, my goal was to buy a fishing cabin and go fishing. That's why I bought this place. I wasn't planning on restoring a stream. I wasn't planning on being a fractivist. That was not it. I just wanted to fish. But I learned that if you really are passionate about it, you got to fight. I have a place here, so I'm, my roots are a little bit stronger. But even for a visiting angler or birder, hiker, you got to stay up on issues. You got to be willing to fight and write letters and do whatever it takes to preserve these places, or they will go away.
And then you wrote another book preceding this one, which is a more lighthearted approach to all kinds of fishing adventures worldwide, and that one's called Fish On, Fish Off. Tell me about that adventure.
So I'm a self-taught angler. No one in my family fishes. I did not have, the uncle who was, I'm going to show you how to fish. I taught myself, and through trial and error and lots of error. So they're basically stories, and I've been lucky enough to fish all around the world. I think at last count I fished in 13 or 14 countries. I fished in Cuba, and I fished in the Congo, and the Falkland Islands, which are also called Las Malvinas, off the southern coast of Argentina. And I've had some really strange things happen to me while fishing. For example, when I was first learning to fish, there was a local tackle shop that directed me to a place along the Jersey Shore where they assured me I would catch very large weakfish, which is this very desirable game fish that I'd never caught before. The part they left out was that it was a nude beach. And I found that out after I walked onto the beach and started fishing. I noticed some beachgoers kind of off to the side. I was so focused on the fishing. I made a couple of casts, and then I turned around, I was like, something weird. And they were all naked. And I was like this 18-year-old kid, like, oh my God. And they thought that was just hysterical at the tackle shop. And then when I was in Zambia, I was fishing for a fish called tigerfish, and I got chased by an elephant. I fished in the Falkland Islands next to an active minefield. In New Jersey, my home state, I've dealt with the opening day of trout season, which is like, it's a violent scrum of poorly mannered fishermen tangling lines and yelling at each other and occasionally falling in. And people who like drink beer at 6:30 in the morning, kind of a thing. And I wrote a long chapter about my evolution of opening day as a little kid, and then kind of taking my own son and that sort of thing. So yeah, Fish On, Fish Off, it's about 60 stories of all sorts of strange things that have happened while fishing.
Having fished all over the world, what makes this little stretch of creek or any of the other fisheries in the Catskills special?
Yeah. Everyone has home water, and it's like comfort food or like a favorite movie that you watch over and over, and you go back to it. And the Catskills is that place for me. Whether it's the Delaware, where again I was camping for 4 days with some friends for an annual trip that I've done for 31 years, and we caught some huge trout, and it was just amazing fishing. Dry fly fishing, which is like, the quintessential fly fishing that everyone wants, and big selective fish that are hard to figure out. And then, this tiny stream where, a 6-inch trout is a good sized fish. And I don't know, there's just something, it's part of my soul. It makes my soul happy to fish here.
Now, dry fly fishing is kind of the holy grail, or what I guess you're really supposed to do as a real trout fisherman or woman. Do you look down on people who drop a worm in the creek?
I don't look down on bait fishers. However, I do look down on people who leave litter behind streams. I look down on people who devalue wild trout, and to them a wild trout's a stock trout and it doesn't matter. The difference between a stock trout and a wild trout is a stock trout is grown in a hatchery. The truck comes up to the stream, throws them in. They're not born and bred in this stream. They have not had to dodge otters and kingfishers and spawn on pea gravel and cold clean water. And, a wild trout is something that should be respected. I'm not saying you should never eat a wild trout, but they should be conserved. Most should be released, if not all. I release all wild trout. That's my own personal ethic. But you can follow the law. If the law says you can keep a trout, you can keep a trout. But knowing how hard it is to be a wild trout in the Catskills, I think the way to respect that fish is to release it. That's my opinion. Stock trout, keep as many as you want, as long as you're within your legal limit. Keep as many as you want. Fill your chain stringer. I do it. I smoke them. Stock trout are delicious. You can tell the difference between a wild trout and a stock trout, usually in their fins and colors. The pectoral fins, which are the fins on the side just behind the gill plate, on a stock trout are usually very small and even sort of crinkled up because they were so crowded they never fully formed. A wild trout has these big, beautiful, healthy pectoral fins. A wild trout, the colors are spectacularly vibrant. Every fin is intact. A stock trout, sometimes the colors are pretty good. A lot of times they're sort of washed out looking. I'm not a snob about it. I fish for stock trout. I know people that do. It's fun. It's great to bring kids out. It's a great way to introduce them to fishing. But you can't look at a wild trout stream the same way you look at a stock stream. It's different. If you do, there'll be no more wild trout. I mean, the Catskills have a long history of being fished out. I mean, they were fished out 150 years ago by people who would come up from New York City. You know, there's all these accounts of like, you know, Thaddeus caught 150 trout in one day, and then like 3 years later, there were no more trout. How'd that happen? Well, duh, you fished them all out. And so wild trout need to be preserved, cherished, respected, worshipped in my case. And, you know, wild trout are an indicator species of a healthy ecosystem here in the Catskills. If you have wild trout, you've got cold, clean water, you probably have a really vibrant aquatic insect population, you probably have a healthy crop of migratory birds, you probably have a lot of good vegetation, all that good stuff.
And with catch and release fishing, are there ways to ensure that the fish will survive that little adventure?
Yeah, so catch and release, it's an ethic, right? And there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. I would say most importantly, you don't catch and release fish if the rivers get warm. And the rivers here in the summer will start to get warm. If the water gets above 65 degrees, you should start thinking maybe I shouldn't be fishing if I'm going to catch and release fish. 66 is okay, 67 you're really getting there. If it hits 70, no way. And the reason why is in the fight, if you hook a big fish and you have to fight it a while, it will not get the oxygen it needs out of the water to survive that ordeal. So you'll be essentially killing the fish. Now, if you're keeping a fish when it's 70, that's fine. But note that the fish you catch, there's a good chance they're going to die. The other thing is I crimp the barbs down on all my hooks, or I buy barbless hooks and I tie my own flies. Barbs do damage to fish, so if you flatten the barb, releasing the fish is much easier. I use a landing net with a rubber mesh, and you scoop the fish up, and so I don't have to handle the fish. Oftentimes with a barbless hook, you scoop the fish, don't even take it out of the water, the fish shakes his head, the hook falls out, I lower the net back in, the fish swims away. The whole release might have taken under 10 seconds. I always like to think in terms of keeping fish out of the water. Imagine if it was me and I had to hold my breath and someone was holding me under the water. Keep that in mind and you'll minimize the damage to the fish. I do see fishermen who are maybe less experienced, or they got to get that picture, they want to get a measurement, they want to do this, they take another angle. The whole time the fish is out of the water, and then finally after this long ordeal they let the fish go. That fish is so stressed during that point, I don't know if they survive. So generally the idea is release the fish as fast as you can. Bring it in as fast as you can. Don't take it out of the water. Get the hook out, let it go. You want to take a quick picture? That's cool. I do it by hold my hand under the fish. Everything is underwater. Click the picture and it's gone.
If you're catching fish, glancing at them briefly and putting them right back, what is the joy or pleasure of going out and catching them in the first place?
That is an interesting question. I mean, some people are like, why are you torturing those fish? The only thing I can think of is, at heart, we are hunters and gatherers. We have an instinct in us to want to hunt stuff and really kill stuff. We do. That's an instinct. And some of us still have that instinct more stronger than others. Plenty of hunters out there. There is some innate caveman itch that gets scratched when you hook and play a fish. To me, there's something about it. I don't know what it is. It's like cats, house cats. They're well fed, yet they love playing with, you take a mouse and a fake mouse or a live mouse. They play with it, they don't eat it. And, that kind of thing. But there's some innate caveman thing that goes on, at least with me when I fish. I love immersing myself in the ecosystem. I love playing predator, I guess. And I love releasing the trout. And someday maybe there'll be a time where I sit along a river and I just watch trout rise and I just go, that's good enough for me. And I kind of do that on the stream here, where I raise fish on my fly and I don't set the hook. I just let them take a swat at it. And I don't hook them. And I just want to see the fish come up and miss the fly. That's cool enough. I don't do that all over the stream. There's one pool in particular where I do, and I'll show it to you. It is so hard not to set the hook, but I do it, and I feel good about it. It's like, oh, I didn't have to.
And so, with a 2-weight rod and Stephen's hand-tied flies, we set out on the 6-foot wide stream to entice some native brook trout.
So I'm going to stay low so as not to spook, and I'm going to try to get that fly right up along that rock without snagging that willow that I just hit. It's like an obstacle course here, which is part of the fun. Oh, you see he came for it? He rose for it, but he missed it. He came up and swirled, but he didn't, sometimes they'll rise up for it and they get spooked. They go, what was that? And they get scared. And he kind of had that, he came up and he swam away really, I missed him, which happens a lot on this stream because the fish are small. Yeah. All right, he's done. We're gonna move. This little spot right here might have a fish.
Wow, when you say we're going to move, it's like 2 feet.
Sometimes.
And it's another little micro pool.
Yeah. This is mini golf. That's what it is. My favorite time to fish the stream is after a thunderstorm. Streams come up a little bit, it's a little bit stained. The fish are aggressively feeding and they're not as spooky. You can approach them without putting them down. There you go. Oh, got him. Ah, crap. That was a brook trout. It's so fun that I can walk literally 20 feet from my porch and do this. As a fisherman, it is really nice. Oh, you see that? Another fish came by, missed him. Subtle rise. One more cast in here. So this pool has a really nice fish, but it's a really hard cast. I gotta kind of get it in that tunnel. So I'll probably just mess it up, but we'll try. But I rose him a couple of times and missed him, but I know he's here. Oh, just spooked another one. So what you do is like you become a great blue heron. You hunch over, you walk really slowly. I've definitely become a better angler because I fish this stream. Spots that I normally would pass up on a big river, I'm like, oh wait, this looks like my stream. And I put a cast in and there's a trout there. And the thing that's so cool about this kind of fishing is like how precise you need to be with your cast. It's not like a foot off that rock. No, it's like 3 inches off that rock is where you need to be. And it's fun. And half the time I miss it. Then I just pick up the fly and try it again. And then when it lands in the right spot, you're like, oh, and oftentimes you're rewarded. So this is fine. I mean, in terms of my fishing satisfaction, I'm raising trout. I don't need to hook them, land them, play them. I raise them. There's a wild trout here. Cool. Have a good day.
But it would still be nice to catch one, especially with me and my microphone tagging along. And so on the last little stretch of stream, Stephen swapped out his fly in a last-ditch effort to hook a curious fish.
Ah, like that. This big spider. This fly on my camping trip caught some really large trout, and it's just a clump of deer hair kind of mangled on a hook. It's one of those impressionistic flies that no fly shop would ever sell you, but it is deadly.
And then a bite.
Oh, wow. Now how about that? Isn't that interesting? I mean, I put that gray fly over that spot a dozen times, but this big thing, he's like, oh. Now, the fact is, he's not big enough to wrap his little mouth around it, but interesting he came up for it. Their stoneflies are starting to hatch, and like they're a meal.
Whoa.
Oh my God.
A catch.
Brett, this is a really big fish for this stream. I mean, really big. Don't come off. It's a big brookie. Holy crap. Oh, whoa. This, and the fly came out, perfect. Remember I was saying when you net the fish? This is a really big brookie. This is the biggest brookie I've caught in this stream in years. So we're keeping him in the net. He's in the water. Okay, so you see the red and the blue halos, and the ivory-tipped fins, and the worm track on the top, which blends in for predators. I mean, it's just a beautiful, this is your native char to the Catskills. This is it. Almost 10 inches, every bit of 9, which is a really nice fish for the stream. Okay, we're gonna let him go. And all I'm gonna do is gonna dipped the net down, and he swam right out. And there he is. That magic spider fly. It is a really ugly fly, but man, that was so interesting that he wouldn't take the more exact imitations, but he was all over that. I'm so glad. That's what makes it fun.
Thanks to Stephen Sautner for spending some time with us in the westernmost Catskills. And to our sponsors, Hanford Mills Museum, the Central Catskills Chamber of Commerce, and the Mountain Eagle. Please subscribe on the podcast app of your choice and tell your friends about us. Every episode is archived at catscast.com. I'm Brett Barry. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.